Barron Trump hadn't said a word in years, until Jasmine Crockett dropped his name on live TV. They were just 12 minutes into the segment when it happened. The studio lights were sharp, the atmosphere tense, but familiar. Another Sunday morning, roundtable on Capitol View, the kind of political show people half-watched while making coffee or folding laundry. Representative Jasmine Crockett, dressed in a sharp navy suit, sat between two seasoned pundits. Across from her was Victor Levinson, a former lobbyist turned political commentator known for interrupting mid-sentence. The topic was ethics, more specifically the investigations quietly gaining steam, campaign finance violations, conflicts of interest, hush money rumors. Nothing new. Until Jasmine leaned in, locked eyes with the host, and said it. "I just find it wild," she began, voice calm but pointed, "that nobody wants to talk about what happened with the trust realignment in January 2021, particularly the one that involved Barron Trump's name." Silence fell. Deirdre Collins, the seasoned anchor, blinked hard and cleared her throat like she was swallowing gravel. Victor smirked, assuming Jasmine had misspoken, but she didn't flinch. She sat there like she'd been waiting months to say it. Deirdre tried to pivot. "Congresswoman, just to clarify, are you alleging Barron Trump was involved in a financial transfer at the end of the Trump presidency?" "I'm saying there's a paper trail with his name on it," Crockett replied, "and we ought to stop pretending it doesn't exist." The control room cut to commercial before anyone could react. But it was too late. Within 5 minutes, clips were online. Jasmine's quote, Deirdre's stammer, Victor's smirk. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, each platform had its own spin. Hashtags exploded before the show even came back from break. In the control room, a junior producer whispered, "This one's gonna blow." And it did. There hadn't been a moment this explosive on live political TV since Katie Couric caught a senator lying about troop levels in Afghanistan back in 2011. But that hadn't involved the child of a former president, especially not one who had barely ever spoken in public. Phones rang. Journalists texted each other in all caps. On a cable panel in Austin, a political analyst removed her earpiece mid-show to ask if anyone could verify the claim. No one could. But the damage was done. Back on set, Jasmine didn't back down. She doubled down. "I'm not attacking a child," she said. "I'm pointing out how power protects itself. If Barron Trump's name was used in that realignment, then let's talk about it. Let's stop pretending some people are too sacred to question." Victor shook his head. "You're politicizing a kid." "I'm politicizing documents," she snapped. "If a name is used in a trust structure to shield wealth from scrutiny, that's not off limits. That's a red flag." The host ended the segment early. No one clapped. No one laughed. It wasn't that kind of moment. Backstage, an intern held up a phone and whispered, "Barron's name is trending everywhere." But what no one knew yet was just how close that 40-second clip came to the one person who wanted no part of any of this. It all came down to 12 carefully chosen words. Let's stop pretending some people are too sacred to question. To understand why those words hit so hard, especially within the Trump family, you'd have to rewind a bit. A week earlier, Jasmine Crockett received a confidential file. It had been forwarded by a staffer on the House Oversight Committee. No explanation, no names, just a scanned document dated January 12, 2021. Inside, paperwork from a blind trust adjustment finalized in the final days of Trump's presidency. And in the list of named beneficiaries, something unexpected. Barron. William Trump. Crockett, a former civil rights attorney, had reviewed hundreds of financial records. This wasn't standard. Barron's inclusion wasn't just unusual. It was strategic. The kind of name you add when you're trying to move assets quietly, betting on the public's belief that the youngest Trump was untouchable. She sat on it for days, unsure. Brought it up with her chief of staff, Patrice Lattimore, a tough, no-nonsense strategist. "You bring that up on air," Patrice warned. And they'll call you a monster. Say you're dragging a kid into politics. Jasmine had stared. At the screen, fingers steepled, debating. She didn't flinch then either. He's 20 now. They used his name. That's not a child. That's a shield. That was Jasmine Crockett's quiet conclusion. And so she took the document with her to the studio, not planning to say anything, not really. But the moment Victor, Levinson started ranting about unfounded witch hunts against conservatives. Something in her snapped. She had seen too much. Too many courtrooms, too many powerful people playing the victim while hiding behind someone else's innocence. She wasn't reckless. She didn't accuse Barron Trump of any crime. She just told the truth on live TV and watched the entire room fall silent. In the days that followed, news anchors slowed down her words frame by frame. She never said he committed fraud, one anchor noted. But she implied he was part of it, another added. Legal experts jumped in. One former IRS investigator said on a podcast that using a family member's name in last-minute trust restructuring wasn't illegal, but it was a well-known tactic, a way to delay scrutiny, muddle investigations, avoid transparency. Online, the response was ferocious. Supporters of Crockett praised her for saying what others were too afraid to, but just as many accused her of crossing a line. Barron has done nothing wrong, read one viral tweet. He's a young man who's tried to stay private. Why drag him into the swamp? But beneath the noise, a quieter conversation began, unfolding in D.C. Political insiders traded theories. Who gave her that file? Was it a leak? A warning? A burn notice from someone close to the Trump circle? Then someone found it, a small but telling detail. An archived press release from a Delaware financial firm dated February 2021 confirmed a trust restructure. No names, just a timestamp. 3 days after the document Crockett referenced, 3 days after Barron's name had appeared in print. The timeline aligned too perfectly to ignore. Someone had moved money, quickly, quietly. The outlines of a larger picture were beginning to form, even if the full canvas was still hidden, and at the center of it was the question Jasmine Crockett had dared to ask. If you're willing to use someone's name to shield wealth, are they really uninvolved? But Barron hadn't seen the segment live, and when he finally did, everything shifted, personally. He was at a small cafe in Sarasota, the Florida sun slanting through palm trees. Sitting across from his childhood friend, Drew Mallory. They were flipping through a college course catalog. He wasn't enrolled yet, but he was thinking about it. Maybe philosophy, maybe computer science, maybe both. He'd kept a low profile for years. No social media, no podcasts, no interviews, just quiet. He wanted it that way. Politics had taken enough out of his family. He'd seen the rallies, the scandals, the headlines. None of it ever felt real. Not the cheering, not the hate, just background noise. But today, the noise had a name. His. The first text came from a cousin in Nevada. "You good? Turn on the news." Then a missed call from his mother. 2 more from blocked numbers. Another text. "Dude, what did Crockett just say about you?" Barron stared at the screen, confused. "What the hell is going on?" Drew looked up. "You might want to see this." He turned his phone toward him. Someone had clipped the exact moment from Capitol View. Jasmine Crockett, leaning in, calm and steady, dropping Barron William Trump like it was just another line in the script. Barron's, breath caught. His hand tightened around his iced coffee. He didn't speak at first. Just watched it, then watched it again. "Why would she say that?" he asked finally. Drew didn't answer. Barron looked down. The table beneath him was scratched and chipped, worn down by years of use. There was a strange hum in his head now, not anger, not fear, just something knotted and raw, like being exposed in a room he'd never entered. He stood abruptly. "Let's get out of here. They pushed through the cafe doors, past a group of high schoolers laughing too loud. Barron pulled his hoodie over his head, walked fast. Not because anyone was following, but because standing still suddenly felt unbearable. At the condo, Melania was already pacing. She hadn't called again. She didn't need to. She just stared at him as he stepped through the door. "I told your father to stop using your name for those things," she said. "No greeting. No hug. I told him years ago." Barron dropped his bag on the floor. "So it's true?" "I don't know," she said, voice low. "Probably. He did a lot of things without telling me." Silence hung in the room. "Did I sign anything?" Barron asked. "No." "Then how the hell does my name end up in a trust document?" Melania looked away. "Because that's how they work. They use names like yours," she said. "Young, quiet, uninvolved, clean." Barron sank into the chair. "That's not clean," he muttered. "That's messed up." She didn't argue, and somehow that silence hit harder than anything else. Later, that night his phone lit up. His father, calling. He didn't answer, just stared at the screen until it dimmed to black. He wasn't angry. Not exactly. But something inside him had cracked open. A soft kind of betrayal. The kind that doesn't yell, but stays. The next morning, the paparazzi were already outside the gate. Not a swarm. Just a few. But enough. Enough to remind him what it felt. Like to be dragged back into the spotlight. One of them called out, "Barron, is Crockett lying? Were you part of the trust?" He didn't respond. Just turned and walked inside. But behind closed doors in Palm Beach, his name was being spoken in a far more serious tone. Inside Mar-a-Lago, the air was tense. Sour. Donald. Trump paced the formal sitting room in slow, restrained steps, the kind he took when he was trying not to explode. A muted Fox Business segment played in the background. The Chiron read, "Crockett names Barron Trump in trust allegation. White House ties." He turned to his longtime attorney, Seth Delaney, a gray-haired man who wore the exhaustion of cleaning up too many messes. "She wasn't supposed to go there," Donald said, voice low and hard. "They've got rules. You don't touch family. You don't touch him." Seth nodded slowly, but his silence said what he wouldn't. The rules were gone. The media didn't care anymore. Melania sat on the couch, arms folded, legs tucked under her like she was bracing for impact. She hadn't said much since the night before. She didn't have to. Ivanka's voice rang out over speakerphone from Miami, sharp and clinical. "Dad, this is going to spiral. Ronan says the networks are already digging through archives." Donald grunted. "Let them dig. There's nothing illegal." "But there's something," Ivanka replied. "And that's all they need. This isn't 2016. You can't just ride it out." Melania finally broke her silence. "He didn't know, Donald." Trump stopped pacing. "Who didn't?" "Barron." Donald blinked. "What are you talking about?" Of course he didn't know. "That's the point." Melania's voice softened. "He's not a child anymore. He sees it now. And he's angry." For a brief moment, something flickered across Trump's face. Regret, maybe. But it passed. He turned. Back to Seth. "Find out who gave her that file. Someone leaked it. I want a name. I want a face." Seth nodded. "We'll look into it, but you should consider a statement." "Absolutely not," Trump snapped. "You respond, you validate." "She's baiting me." "I'm not biting." Across the estate, in another wing of the mansion, Barron lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from someone he hadn't heard from since boarding school. "Didn't think I'd see you trending. You okay?" He didn't answer, just swiped it away. A knock. His father entered, slower than usual. "Mind if I sit?" Barron shrugged. "Sure." Trump eased into the desk chair, spinning it slightly, like he used to when Barron was a kid. Now his son towered over him. his face unreadable. "I didn't think it would blow back like this," Donald said, eyes fixed ahead. Barron stared at the ceiling. "Why use my name? You weren't involved. It was paperwork, that's all. A name helps make things stick, makes it look clean." Barron turned to look at him. "You mean I make it look clean?" There it was. Donald didn't deny it, didn't deflect, just let the silence stretch. "I didn't want this," Barron said quietly. "I've spent my whole life trying to stay out of this mess." Trump nodded slowly. "Sometimes you don't get to choose what gets attached to your name." Barron looked him in the eye. "I didn't attach anything. You did." That one landed. Harder than Donald expected. But while the family scrambled behind gates in silence, the outside world kept turning. By Monday morning, Barron Trump was no longer a byline. He was a headline. His name ran across every major network, not as a side note, but front and center, on TikTok explainers, on political blogs, on cable news panels with red-circled screenshots and animated timelines. CNN aired a split screen, Jasmine Crockett in her chair, speaking his name, and a photo of Barron walking alone through an airport. MSNBC brought in analysts to debate it live. Was it fair? Was it calculated? Was it reckless? And still, Barron said nothing. But the country wasn't done saying his name. On Fox News, the tone turned combative. They framed it as a targeted smear campaign, an attack on an innocent young man. The full facts weren't out yet. Didn't matter. The internet doesn't wait for confirmation. It never has. Clips of Jasmine Crockett's statement hit 20 million views in less than 24 hours. Someone cut it into a dramatic montage with swelling violins. Someone else turned it into a meme. Crockett at the hearing table, Barron's face photoshopped onto an explosion in the background. The internet doesn't do nuance. Hashtags started. Trending. "So Barron, Crockett files, too sacred to question." Even poor Barron started trending, mostly in sympathy. But sympathy didn't stop the speculation. A Reddit thread, supposedly from a former White House staffer, exploded with 15,000 comments. Grainy screenshots, alleged financial documents. Most were fake, obvious fakes. But again, the truth wasn't the point. People had already made up their minds. Some thought Barron was just a pawn in his father's game. Others claimed it was all a deep state setup, timed to kneecap Trump before the election. Then came the live streams. YouTubers and pundits ran hour-long. Breakdowns with titles like "The Secret Trump Trust," "What We Know So Far," "Barron Speaks." One guy in Portland claimed he had leaked emails from Deutsche Bank. He had zero evidence. Still, 200,000 people tuned in to hear him ramble. Even journalists who'd steered clear of Barron for years were now digging through public records, searching for a signature, a school form, a real estate deed. Privacy, once considered a given, for the youngest Trump, was gone within 48 hours. Meanwhile, in Miami, Jasmine Crockett's team was overwhelmed. They hadn't expected the blowback to be this intense. Hate mail flooded in. So did praise. Voters from across the country wrote in dozens, thanking her for saying what others were too afraid to. One retired schoolteacher from Oregon wrote, "For the first time, someone said what we've all been thinking. No name should be off limits if it's protecting corruption." Her press secretary begged her to issue a clarifying statement, to soften the heat, shift the narrative. Jasmine refused. "I didn't accuse anyone," she told her team. "I exposed a detail. If it wasn't true, they'd have sued me by now." And she was right. Despite the media firestorm, Trump's legal team hadn't issued a single cease and desist. No threats, no lawsuits, just silence. And to many, that silence was louder than any denial, but the internet wasn't just watching, it was digging. That night, a political blogger in Phoenix, one who had previously broken 2 major campaign finance stories, posted a cryptic thread. He didn't say much, just a timestamp, a trust registration number, a screenshot from Delaware's public record system, matching the file Crockett referenced. Suddenly, people weren't just reacting anymore. They were investigating, and the next move wasn't coming. From the media or Crockett or even from Trump. It came from someone no one expected. Barron himself. But far from Mar-a-Lago or Capitol Hill, in a cramped apartment above a liquor store in Phoenix, a man named Curtis Rojas was already connecting dots. Curtis hunched over two monitors, legal pads scattered across his desk, half-eaten takeout and empty soda cans littering the floor. A rusted ceiling fan ticked above him. He wasn't a journalist, at least not officially. No degree, no press badge, no newsroom. But he'd been right too many times to ignore. 2 years earlier, he uncovered a hidden pack funneling foreign money into a congressional race. It barely made the news. But the right people noticed, especially the ones watching the money. He hadn't planned on circling back to the Trump orbit. But when Crockett spoke Barron's name on live TV, something sparked. He remembered seeing it months ago, Barron Trump, tucked into a digital record in Delaware's public access portal. A brief trust registration. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it might mean everything. He pulled up the portal again, typing, Trump Trust 2021. Nothing. He tried, W. Trump. Still nothing. Then he remembered something an accountant once told him, over drinks. When people want to hide money, they don't use names. They use initials, shell companies, third-party custodians. So Curtis broadened the search. Every trust registered in Delaware between January 6th and January 15th, 2021. 57 results. He scrolled slowly, cross-checking addresses, matching, LLC managers, looking for the name beneath the name. Somewhere in that list, he was sure of it. Something had been buried, and now it was starting to surface. Then he found it. A trust filed on January 12, 2021, BW Legacy Holdings. The name meant nothing at first, but the details didn't lie. Custodial designation, minor adult beneficiary, mailing address, a P.O. box linked to a Palm Beach accounting firm, and at the bottom of the scanned document, nearly faded in black ink, was a signature Curtis recognized immediately, M.A. Yonovitz. Trump's longtime family tax lawyer. Curtis leaned back in his chair. No assumptions, no rush. He made copies, cross-referenced filings, combed through LLC records. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a one-off filing. It was a structure. Shell companies in Wyoming and South Dakota, multiple custodians, obscure cross-ownership, all pointing back to the same financial web. The full name, Barron William Trump, never appeared again, but 3 initials did, BWT, listed. Beneath a section labeled Deferred Beneficiary Designations. Curtis knew what that meant. Barron wasn't managing anything, but someone had planned for him to profit from it. That changed everything. Crockett's claim wasn't just provocative anymore. It was verifiable. Now came the hard part, going public. He could post the documents, but trolls would pick them apart. Or worse, come after him personally, spin it as a hit job, paint him as a partisan, a liar. Curtis paced the room, heart pounding. Finally, he posted one document, just one. And with it, a single carefully worded caption. Why was a trust listing? BWT as beneficiary created 3 days before the end of the Trump presidency, and why hasn't anyone asked? The tweet lit a match. Within minutes, people were piecing it together. BWT, January 12th, Palm Beach, Trump's tax lawyer. It was just enough to reignite the fire. 20 minutes later, Curtis got a DM from a freelance reporter in Jacksonville. Are you sure that's who you think it is? Curtis replied. Yes, but I'm not the one who needs to explain it. In Sarasota, Barron Trump saw the tweet while scrolling in bed. He read it 3 times. No statement from his family. No denial from the lawyers. Just silence. He sat there, staring at the screen. For once, the questions weren't being asked about him. They were being asked around him. And the pressure to answer was closing in. But instead of retreating, Barron made a decision that would flip the narrative. Again. He hadn't posted anything publicly in years, not since a forgotten SoundCloud account in high school. Even then, it had been just instrumental music. No vocals, no face. He preferred the shadows. That was the deal, unspoken but clear. Stay low. Don't react. The world will forget you exist. But now his name was everywhere. Memes, think pieces, primetime panels, the trust, the initials, the signature. His middle name turned into ammunition. He wasn't built for this. Not like his father. Not like Ivanka, who had polished herself into a brand. He wasn't a strategist. He wasn't even sure he was ready. He was just a kid who had spent years trying to stay out of the spotlight. Late Tuesday night, in a group chat with a few trusted friends, Barron typed, "I think I want to say something." One friend replied instantly, "Like, public?" Another, "Bro, careful. That'll just make it worse." But silence felt worse. Silence felt like suffocating. He opened his notes app, typed, deleted, tried again. Everything sounded defensive, cold, forced. But the pressure wouldn't let up. The longer he stayed quiet, the more people filled in the silence for him. So he made a different move. He messaged someone who had never treated him like a name, or a symbol, or a headline. Her name was Leah Quinton. They'd sat next to each other for 2 semesters at Columbia Prep. Now she ran a small but growing YouTube channel, mostly commentary on social issues, mental health, the odd interview. Nothing flashy, no agenda. He messaged her late that night. "Not sure you'll want to touch this, but I'd rather talk to someone real than get chewed up by CNN." She replied within minutes. "You sure?" "Yeah." By the next afternoon, Leah was in Sarasota. No crew, no studio. Just a handheld recorder, 2 chairs, and a dim room with half-closed blinds. They didn't film. Barron didn't want his face out there, but he wanted his voice to be heard. The recording ran just under 15 minutes. Measured, careful, honest. He didn't deny the trust existed, but he didn't pretend to fully understand it either. "I never signed anything," Barron said, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't even know about it until last week. If someone wants to hand me something from a vault when I'm 30, fine. But don't use my name like I agreed to all this. I didn't." When Leah asked how it felt watching the story unfold from the outside, his voice cracked slightly. "It's weird," he said. "Hearing people talk about you like you're either a victim or a villain. I'm not either. I'm just trying to be normal." She didn't press. She didn't have to. The silence between his sentences carried its own weight. Barron ended the conversation with a soft, almost embarrassed reflection. People need to stop thinking that silence from someone young means they're okay with everything. Sometimes we're just tired of being spoken for. That evening, Leah posted a short audio excerpt, just a minute of his voice. No video, no context, just him. The internet exploded. Some dismissed it as a PR stunt. Others called it the most honest thing any Trump had ever said in public. Let Barron speak trended for hours. But what shifted wasn't the content, it was the tone. Raw, unscripted, human. The political world didn't know what to do with that. But while Barron's words sparked empathy, Jasmine Crockett was facing a storm of her own. In her D.C. office, she stood by the tinted window, watching the sky darken over Capitol Hill. Her phone buzzed again, 6 times in 5 minutes, but she didn't move. She already knew what the messages were about. Since Barron's interview dropped, the narrative had started to tilt, not against her entirely, but definitely off course. The press reframed the story. Less about the trust, more about the ethics of naming him at all. The headlines made it clear Crockett's statement sparks empathy for Trump's son. Was it a step too far? Barron speaks. Nation listens. Should Crockett respond? Inside her office, the air was tense. Phones rang constantly. Emails flooded in, praise and outrage in equal measure. Her chief of staff, Patrice Lattimore, stood nearby, gripping a tablet of talking points for the press briefing they'd been avoiding all week. "You don't have to apologize," Patrice said quietly. "But you do have to say something. You're letting everyone else steer this now." Jasmine didn't reply right away. She wasn't tired from guilt. Not exactly. She didn't regret saying it, maybe just how it came out. She turned from the window. They're shifting the focus, making it about tone, not truth. "I know," Patrice said, "but tone gets people listening. Truth just keeps them arguing." Jasmine rubbed her temples. "Do you think I went too far?" Patrice didn't sugarcoat it. "I think you went farther than people were ready for." That night, Jasmine recorded a short video in her kitchen. No podium, no flag. No makeup, just her in a sweatshirt, seated at a table with worn edges. She didn't walk anything back, but her voice was softer. Less courtroom, more living room. "To the people who felt I crossed a line, I hear you. I understand the reaction. And I also believe we can talk about systems of power without pretending some names are immune. My job isn't to protect feelings. It's to protect fairness." She paused, then added, "If a name was used, it should be questioned. Even if that name belongs to someone who never asked to be involved, that's not an attack, it's accountability." The video went viral in less than an hour. Responses split sharply. Some thanked her for staying firm. Others said she missed a moment to show grace. But one thing was clear, she wasn't backing down. The next day, her office received a package. No return address. Inside, a manila envelope. 3 printed pages, dates, transaction records. And one line that stood out. Custodial override filed under adult minor clause. The term would mean nothing to most people. But Jasmine stared at it like a warning flare. Someone was still leaking, and someone wanted her to keep going. Patrice frowned. "You think this is bait?" Jasmine shook her head. "No, it's a door. And someone's daring me to walk through it." She tucked the envelope into her briefcase and locked it. That night, Jasmine rewatched Barron's interview with Leah. When he said, "I didn't sign up for any of this," something shifted. For the first time, she didn't see a last name. She saw a kid, a son, someone whose father made decisions behind closed doors and never explained them. It complicated things. But the person it hit hardest wasn't Jasmine. It was someone else. Still, at home, still trying to make sense of it all. Barron sat at the edge of the pool behind the Sarasota condo, knees pulled to his chest. Earbuds in, no music playing. The moonlight rippled across the water in broken, uneven strips, like the surface was trying to say something in a language only he could understand. He hadn't gone online all day. The silence felt cleaner. A few feet away, his mother sat wrapped in a light shawl, holding a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Neither of them spoke for a while. Eventually, Melania broke the quiet. "I watched the interview." He glanced over. "Yeah? You sounded like yourself." Barron gave a tired smile. "That's good. I wasn't trying to sound like anyone else." She hesitated. "Do you want to know what your father said about it?" He shrugged. "Not really." She took a sip anyway. "He said you were careful, that you didn't give them anything to twist." He was relieved. Barron nodded, still staring at the water. "I think," she added, "he was also a little scared." He looked over, eyebrow raised. "Of what? Me saying more?" "No," she said. "Of you saying exactly enough." He didn't respond, but the words landed. Somewhere inside, they stuck. From inside, the TV buzzed faintly. CNN was airing a segment. political families, and the limits of privacy. A host's voice echoed through the open door. Should the children of public figures be held accountable for financial decisions made in their name? Barron stood up and turned it off. Later that night, his father arrived unannounced. Melania let him in without a word. He walked in slowly, navy blazer, no tie. He looked more worn than usual, like the weight of the past week had finally settled into his bones. "Can we talk?" he asked. Barron sat down on the couch. Trump didn't take the chair opposite. He stayed standing, hands in his pockets. "I know this isn't how you wanted to be seen," Trump said. "I never wanted this. For you." Barron looked up. "Then why use my name?" There was no accusation in his tone, just exhaustion. Trump looked away. "Because I thought it was harmless. I didn't think it would ever matter. It was protective." "For you," Barron said. "Not for me." His father flinched like he wanted to argue, to say something sharp. But he didn't. Instead, he walked to the window and stared out. "I'm not mad that people know," Barron said after a while. "I'm mad that I didn't." Trump turned. "You think I didn't want to tell you?" Barron shook his head. "I think you didn't think you had to." Trump exhaled, part frustration, part reluctant understanding. "I didn't see the harm." "Well," Barron said, "now you do." The room went quiet again. Then Barron added, quieter this time, "I don't want to be part of the brand." Trump furrowed his brow. "What brand?" "You know what I mean." The words hung in the air like a dare. Trump didn't answer. Just nodded, slowly, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "You did good with that interview. You were calm, direct." "I wasn't performing," Barron said. "I was just trying to sound like me." Trump held his gaze for a moment, then left without another word. That night, Barron opened his laptop and started writing. Not a statement, not a post, just thoughts, scattered, unfinished, honest. About identity, inheritance, silence. He didn't know what he'd do with it. But writing felt better than saying nothing. While father and son reached their quiet impasse, the country was still circling a larger question. Where does responsibility end when legacy begins? By week's end, the story had evolved beyond headlines. People weren't just debating what Jasmine Crockett said, or why Barron responded. They were asking why it took this long for anyone to notice what had been hiding in plain sight, in living rooms, on college campuses, across talk radio in Kansas, and diners in Wisconsin. Real conversations were happening, not about left or right, but about the blurry lines between family and power, privacy and accountability. It wasn't about whether you liked the Trumps or despised them. It was about what happens when your name carries a legacy you never chose, and silence is mistaken for consent. In Spokane, a high school civics teacher turned it into a classroom debate. Does being connected to power mean you owe the public more transparency? Responses varied. Some said yes, some said no. But no one shrugged. That was the shift. Even in Washington, the tone had changed. Lawmakers, left and right, grew more cautious, more aware that people were paying attention in ways they hadn't before. Jasmine Crockett, for her part, went quiet, turned down interviews, skipped the Sunday shows, let the story breathe. She knew she'd said enough. Now it wasn't about her anymore. The conversation had its own momentum. And Barron, he stayed, out of the spotlight. No follow-ups, no statements. But people close to him said he seemed lighter, not happy, just clear. For once, people saw him not as a headline in waiting, but as a person. And he kept writing. Somewhere in his notes was a line he'd circled twice. Just because I didn't speak up before doesn't mean I was okay with it. That line said more than any press release ever could. In a country where politics moves like a storm, loud, fast, often senseless, this story lingered. Not because of the scandal, but because of the questions it raised. Should the children of the powerful be protected or held accountable? Is silence protection or complicity? And who gets to draw that line? People didn't agree. They weren't supposed to. But they were finally asking, and that might be the most honest place to start, because at the end of the day, every name carries something. Some carry legacy, some carry shame, some carry nothing at all, but still get dragged along for the ride. And when you're born into power, even your silence speaks. In Barron Trump's case, for once, he chose what that silence meant. If this story made you think, share it. If it made you question something you've taken for granted, talk about it. And if you believe that power, no matter the name, deserves transparency, don't look away just because it gets uncomfortable. Subscribe for more stories that ask the hard questions.